There comes a moment in life when the words you speak no longer matter, when the efforts you give are taken for granted, and the love you offer is met with silence. And it is in that silence that your true power begins. Silence is a strange kind of power, one that most people misunderstand until life forces them to face it. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop defending your worth to someone who has already made up their mind, you step into a realm of strength that words could never touch. In relationships, we are often taught that communication can fix anything, that if we just say the right thing or express enough emotion or try a little harder, the other person will finally understand. But sometimes the truth isn't hidden in more talking. Sometimes the truth is revealed in your absence, in your quiet, in the space you no longer fill, because silence, when chosen intentionally, is not emptiness. It is clarity. When you have poured your heart into someone who meets you with indifference, your words begin to lose their meaning. You could shout your pain, cry your truth, or whisper your love, but if the other person has chosen not to hear, your voice only echoes back to you, reminding you how one-sided your effort has become. It's in that moment that silence becomes your best ally. It says what your words could not. I will not fight for someone who isn't fighting for me. I will not beg for understanding that should have come naturally. Silence then becomes a statement, not of surrender, but of self-respect. The power of silence is not about ignoring someone to manipulate them. It's about realizing that constant reaction keeps you trapped in their emotional loop. Every message, every argument, every attempt to fix what's already broken, it keeps you connected to pain. But when you fall silent, you break that pattern. You create distance not to punish, but to protect. You give yourself space to breathe, to see things clearly, to remember who you were before their chaos became your normal. And in that quiet, you start to hear your own voice again, the one that was drowned out by trying too hard to be understood. There's a sacred stillness that follows when you decide to stop forcing connection. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even painful. You may question yourself, wondering if your silence will make them forget you. But here's the paradox. Silence doesn't make people forget, it makes them remember, because absence amplifies what presence took for granted. The quiet becomes a mirror that reflects what was lost, not to you, but to them. They begin to feel the weight of your stillness, the difference between your presence and your distance. They begin to realize that your voice was not noise, it was warmth, guidance, light. In the end, silence doesn't just teach them a lesson, it teaches you one too. It shows you that peace does not come from being heard. It comes from no longer needing to explain yourself. It reminds you that your energy is precious and that not everyone deserves access to it. When words lose meaning, silence becomes truth. And when you finally master the art of holding your peace, you become untouchable, calm, centered, and free. When you match his silence, it's not an act of pride or a game of control. It's a declaration of self-worth. It's the moment you stop trying to prove your love to someone who stopped appreciating it. Matching silence is not revenge, it's revelation. You begin to see how much of yourself you were giving away, trying to hold together something that only you were showing up for. There is a kind of power that rises in you when you stop chasing after someone's attention and start honoring your own presence instead. That's when you realize that the silence you once feared is actually the peace you always needed. Matching his silence means you've learned the hardest lesson of all, that not everyone deserves your effort, your energy, or your emotion. You no longer feel the need to text to fill the void or to explain why you've gone quiet, because deep down you know that the right person will never leave you wondering where you stand. You understand that sometimes. People pull away to test if you'll chase, to see if their absence still controls you. But when you match that absence with grace, with calm, with composure, you change the dynamic completely. You're not reacting from hurt anymore. You're responding from strength. You are saying, without saying a word, I'm not afraid of being without you. I'm afraid of losing myself trying to keep you. There's something magnetic about someone who can stay silent with confidence. It unsettles those who expect you to break, to reach out, to beg for attention. Your stillness becomes powerful because it exposes their expectation They thought they had power over your emotions, but now they're the ones left wondering what you're thinking, how you're feeling, whether you've moved on. That's the beauty of emotional detachment. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care about yourself more than their approval. You've shifted from needing reassurance to trusting your own peace. Matching his silence doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you've started respecting yourself. It's an act of emotional maturity because silence teaches you things that chaos never will. It teaches you to listen to your intuition, to feel the difference between effort and exhaustion, to recognize when love turns into emotional labor. You begin to see that real love doesn't demand constant proving. It simply exists in presence, in mutual care, in consistency. And if someone can't meet you there, your silence becomes the boundary that protects you from being drained again. Eventually, he'll notice, not immediately, not loudly, but slowly, quietly, deeply, he'll realize that the energy that once surrounded him is gone. The texts, the care, the gentle concern, all replaced by silence, and that silence will echo louder than any argument ever could, because when you match his silence, you remind him of everything he lost when he stopped showing up. You become a mirror reflecting his choices back at him, and in that reflection, he'll see his biggest mistake, thinking your silence meant defeat, when it actually meant freedom. Regret doesn't arrive in the middle of a fight, nor does it surface while the noise of distraction still fills the air. Regret is born in silence, in the still moments when there's nothing left to say, when the phone doesn't light up anymore, and when the person who once gave endless chances has finally gone quiet. That's when the reality of loss sets in. When you stop reaching out, when you no longer explain, when your heart no longer tries to fix what was breaking you, the silence becomes deafening for the one who took your presence for granted. It becomes a haunting echo of all the things they ignored when they had the chance. Silence is a mirror. It reflects back everything the other person refused to see when you were trying to show love. It's strange how someone can be surrounded by your care, your energy, your light, and still not notice its warmth until it's gone. The human heart often awakens in the absence of what it once dismissed. When you match his silence, he's forced to sit with the weight of your absence, and that's where regret begins to grow. Not because you punished him, but because you stopped rescuing him from the consequences of his own detachment. He begins to feel the emptiness that your voice used to fill, the texts that no longer come, the good mornings that have disappeared, the concern that has faded. All of it becomes a quiet reminder that love doesn't beg forever. The beauty and the pain of silence lie in its truthfulness. It doesn't lie, it doesn't argue, it doesn't justify, it simply reveals, and in that revelation, he begins to hear the truth that words never could. Every moment he ignored your effort, every time he delayed his response, every time he made you question your value, all of it starts to replay in his mind like a film he can't pause. That's how regret works. It arrives too late, when the heart it wants forgiveness from has already found peace elsewhere. Your silence teaches a lesson that no confrontation ever could. It shows that real connection can't survive neglect. It shows that love, no matter how strong, fades when it's not nurtured. The day he feels the emptiness you once felt is the day he finally understands what you were offering. But by then, you've already moved into a new space, one of self-assurance, one where you no longer need validation from someone who couldn't see your worth in the light. Regret thrives in reflection. It grows in the spaces where pride used to live. He'll remember the softness in your voice, the safety in your presence, the care in your silence, and realize that those things weren't guaranteed. They were gifts. And when those gifts are no longer his, the silence becomes unbearable. Because it's not just the absence of sound, it's the absence of you. And that is what he will regret most. That your silence didn't just end the noise, it ended his chance to ever hear your love again. There comes a time when your heart grows tired of trying to understand why someone changed, why their warmth turned cold, why their presence became so rare. You reach a point where explanations no longer heal and closure no longer matters. That's when silence becomes your medicine. Matching his silence isn't about giving up. It's about awakening to the truth that chasing someone who's emotionally gone only leaves you empty. When you let go and allow silence to do the talking, you begin a sacred process of rediscovering yourself. You stop searching for answers in another person's confusion and start finding peace in your own clarity. Letting go is not weakness. It is one of the highest forms of strength. It means you've learned to protect your heart, not by building walls, but by understanding who deserves entry. Silence gives you time to heal, to breathe, to step away from the noise of what if and why me. It's during that quiet that you begin to see things as they truly are, not as you hoped they would be. You begin to realize that the love you were giving so freely wasn't a mistake. It was just misplaced. You were trying to water a plant that had stopped growing because the soil was no longer nurturing. Matching his silence is you walking away from the drought and finding your way back to fertile ground, the ground of self-respect and emotional balance. The peace that comes from letting go is unlike anything else. It doesn't happen overnight. It begins as pain, then turns into reflection, and finally blossoms into acceptance. You start to see that you don't need to chase love. Love flows naturally where it's meant to. You start to understand that being alone is not loneliness. It's the freedom to finally hear your own thoughts, to feel your own emotions, to reconnect with the parts of yourself that you neglected while trying to be enough for someone else. The silence you now live in is not empty. It's full of growth. It's filled with lessons, self-awareness, and the gentle whisper of your soul saying, "You made it through." And in that peace, something powerful happens. You forgive, not because they asked, but because you're tired of carrying the weight. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It means release. You let go of the resentment, the constant need for answers, and the desire for them to regret losing you. You stop needing their apology because you've given yourself permission to move forward. Silence becomes your bridge to healing, your doorway to peace. When you match his silence, you reclaim your energy. You take back your emotional power. You finally see that you were never losing love. You were losing the illusion of it. The silence you now keep is no longer a void. It's your sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, you rise stronger, softer, and wiser. You no longer wait for someone to return because you have already returned to yourself. There's a profound shift that happens inside you the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop trying to convince someone of your worth. It's as if a quiet strength takes over, and suddenly the need for validation disappears. You start to realize that your value has never been dependent on someone else's ability to see it. When you no longer seek approval, you become magnetic, not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because you've stepped into your own energy. People are drawn to those who are whole within themselves, who radiate calm instead of desperation, who move with certainty instead of seeking permission. Matching his silence is that moment when your focus turns inward. You no longer look for answers in his absence. You find peace in your presence. When you stop trying to prove your love, something changes in the dynamic. The person who once took your kindness for granted begins to feel the difference. You no longer text first, you no longer explain why you're quiet, and you no longer chase what's already walking away. Instead, you choose to protect your peace. And that silence, that calm refusal to engage in emotional games, becomes louder than any words you could ever speak. It tells him that you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to be chosen. You've entered a new space, one where love is mutual, not one-sided. People who rely on your constant effort start to feel uneasy when you no longer play your part in their pattern. Your silence exposes the imbalance they tried to ignore. They begin to notice that their comfort was built on your effort, the love, the reassurance, the forgiveness. All those things they assumed would always be there suddenly vanish. That absence becomes a mirror. It forces them to see how much they depended on your light without ever protecting it. The irony is that your silence now communicates what your words never could. I am no longer available for half-love, uncertainty, or disrespect. As you stop seeking validation, your energy changes. You move differently. You speak less, but your presence says more. You're no longer reacting. You're responding with wisdom. You no longer attach your worth to being understood because you've learned that peace doesn't require explanation. This is the transformation that silence brings. It shifts you from needing to be seen to knowing that you are enough, even in the unseen. The power is no longer in being chosen. It's in choosing yourself. And here's the truth. People always feel it when your energy changes. When you detach, they notice. When you no longer react, they feel it. And when you finally move in silence, they begin to wonder what they lost. Matching his silence turns the tables without you having to do anything dramatic. You simply become still, and in that stillness, your worth speaks louder than ever. Your silence says everything he refused to hear, and eventually, he'll realize that losing your attention was the biggest mistake he ever made. When you match his silence, it's not about trying to make him miss you. It's about finally understanding your own power. You stop moving from emotion and begin to move from wisdom. You no longer feel the need to explain, justify, or prove your love to someone who already knows it and still chose distance. You reach a stage where peace means more than attention, where dignity matters more than being right, and where your silence becomes your greatest strength. This isn't revenge, it's self-mastery, the ability to stay calm when everything in you wants to react. It's knowing that not every action deserves a response, and not every loss deserves mourning. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. In this space of silence, you rediscover your strength. You start to see that closure doesn't always come from conversations. Sometimes it comes from accepting what has already been shown. When someone's actions consistently contradict their words, their silence only confirms what you already knew but didn't want to face. Matching that silence is not avoidance. It's acceptance. It's saying to yourself, I see things clearly now, and I refuse to lose myself in confusion. That realization frees you. It allows you to stop chasing after potential and start valuing consistency. Self-mastery is not born from comfort. It's forged in the moments when you want to break the silence but choose peace instead. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that your worth isn't diminished because someone couldn't recognize it. You begin to move with a certain calm, a stillness that intimidates those who once had emotional control over you. The person who expected you to react now finds themselves unsettled by your calm. That's the moment the power shifts, not because you wanted it to, but because you stopped feeding their ego with your energy. Your silence becomes sacred. It's no longer a void of pain, but a shield of strength. You've learned that love doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace, and that respect must always begin within. Every time you resist the urge to break the silence for validation, you build emotional muscle. Every moment you choose calm over chaos, you elevate. And in that elevation, you realize something profound. You no longer need them to regret losing you. You've already won by finding yourself again. Eventually, they will notice, maybe not immediately, but the day will come when they reach for the version of you that used to always be there. And she's gone. Not bitter, not angry, just evolved. Your silence will remind them of what they lost, not just a person, but a presence. That's when regret will finally find them. But by then, you'll be far beyond that chapter, living in peace, surrounded by your own light. Matching his silence wasn't an ending. It was your beginning, the moment you reclaimed your power, your heart, and your freedom.